Everybody, thanks for joining us. Today is a second part of our continuing series on, reminds me of a kid I knew in Utica who had not had a hit in the first three games, and he got one in one game, and he said, that's one game in succession I got a hit. So, yeah, this is our second in a series. Um, and we started with Rami Corey and Ralph Nader and Maya. And now we're beginning to move through some of the villages in the south of Lebanon that are being impacted as all part of our effort to put a human face on what is happening and be able to allow people to tell the stories of their families, their villages, um, and how what is happening today, but also what has been happening over the last several decades, has impacted the south of Lebanon. People will forget that this area was occupied by Israel from um, the late 70s. I think it was 78 was the first occupation, all the way through to 2000 when they left. And in its wake, there was a huge exodus of people who came to the U.S. and a lot of suffering and a lot of pain and memories of what life had been like before and after, and now they're reliving it one more time with bombings, killings, and mass evacuations, ordered evacuations by Israel. So we have two people today from two different villages. I'm going to start with Abbas Alawieh, who many of you might remember from the uncommitted movement. Begin us this conversation with us, if you would. And then next is going to be Rachel Abouzaid from who is not from the village. It's her husband's village, but she has a couple of really fascinating stories to tell about her connection to the village and about the relationship that they have. Um, and so I'd like to start with you, Abbas, and tell us a bit about it.
Jim, thank you so much for having me. Thank you for your leadership, and thank you to the entire team at the Arab American Institute. I think in a moment like this, when it feels like there is so little to be done in the face of so much despair, the most important thing that we can be doing is getting into the weeds. Really taking a moment to inspect, to consider what it is that the Israeli military is systematically erasing and annihilating, because it's not just a home or two or a story or two. It is a rich history that is fundamental to our to what it is to be human. And so it's a privilege to have a few moments to talk about my village and all of this. So my name is Abbas. I immigrated to this country at the age of 6. And I grew up in the beautiful Dearborn community. And both my sister and I grew up to be public servants. My sister served as the Chief Deputy Attorney General here in the state of Michigan, and I served as a Chief of Staff in Congress, working for incredible members of Congress like Congresswoman Cori Bush and Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib and Congressman Andy Levin. And now, as you mentioned, Jim, I am having conversations door to door with community members where I'm running to represent folks here in local office, state senate. And I only mention that to say I happen to be running for office in an area that is that has very rich Arab American representation. And on any given day, I wake up and I get calls from multiple community members I'm running to represent who are sharing stories of their homes being erased, multiple family members being killed. Just this past weekend, I attended two different memorial services for community members, family members who were killed abroad. And so, in my own family, I come from a small village on my dad's side of Arnoun. Arnoun, Lebanon, is a small village of a couple of thousand people just outside of the larger city of Nabateeh. It's in the Nabateeh Governorate. And Arnoun is a beautiful agricultural community. It's a beautiful community of folks who have a long history, centuries old, of tobacco farming, of working the land, of living off of the land, of poetry and music, and of all that is beautiful in this world. It's also strategically positioned at the top of sort of this the largest point in this area of South Lebanon, where a really beautiful Crusader era castle called the Beaufort Castle sits.
Can I stop you a second?
Yeah.
Could you put that up on the screen, Liam? Thanks. I'm sorry, Abbas. Keep.
No, you're good. So the Beaufort Castle sits atop of our village. That is the Beaufort Castle right there. That photo might as well be taken from right where my grandmother's home is, or I should say was. My grandmother's home was destroyed about a month ago now by the Israeli military. My grandmother is 91 years old. She poses no threat, material or otherwise, to anyone in the world. If she's guilty of anything, it's probably that she prays too often and too hard for her grandchildren, her children, and the people that she loves. She has spent decades of her life working the land that you see here in this photo, actually. And my father and his siblings spent their entire childhood playing in that castle in this photo, in the Beaufort Castle, living a life of living a rural life. Going down behind that castle is a very steep way down to the Litani River, where where our family would go to wash our clothes and to get the water necessary to live our lives. This area also, given that it's a Crusader era castle, it gives you a hint that this is an area of immense military significance, and I think the Israeli military saw that early on when you were describing, Jim, in the late 70s, at the beginning of the first occupation of South Lebanon, of course, the incursion, and then eventually the permanent military occupation that lasted between 1982 and 2000. So the home, my grandmother's home, stood, in this village, and it was destroyed by the Israeli military in 1978. And then we rebuilt it, and it was destroyed again in 1982. And then in the year 2000, I remember being an Arab American kid visiting my grandmother for the summer. And I remember my grandmother and grandfather pitching a tent exactly where their home once stood, where it had been destroyed by the Israeli military twice before, and said, "This is where our home was, and this is where we're going to rebuild." And I saw my grandparents lay the foundation for that home that ended up being not just a place where one or two people lived, but it was a really, really special place. Our home was the kind of place where any villager who's passing by would stop by. Folks from traveling from as far as the United States and Australia, or as near as the next town over, would stop by this house. It'd be 2 a.m. and there'd still be 20 people outside dancing, laughing, enjoying each other's company. Half of those folks were liable to stay the night just because that's the kind of home that it was. My grandparents rebuilt that home in 2000. My grandmother lived there for the last 26 years. In her old age, she was able to live a life of dignity, of reconnection with her land, with what makes her enjoy her life, in a home that was specifically designed for her to age in with dignity, with a bedroom that's right next to a bathroom with an accessible tub, the things that every elder in our community, and indeed in the world, deserves to age in place with dignity. That's what was afforded to her
Hmm.
in this home. She was forced out of this home into an apartment with 20 of my family members in Beirut, a two-bedroom flat where folks are in a state of waiting because of an alleged ceasefire that my family tells me daily is anything but. The Israeli military continues its attacks on our village, and they've erased my grandmother's home. My grandmother's home, which was a beautiful place, is now reduced to rubble. And
Hmm.
as an Arab American, as an American, I feel a unique responsibility to speak out in this moment. I'm
Hmm.
grateful to you, Jim, for the space to
Thanks.
talk about
Thanks,
it.
Abbas. One of the reasons we conceived of this was both to have the stories told, but also there's a kind of a therapeutic effect, I think, of having the opportunity to be able to share and an opportunity for those of us here to be able to hear, to put a human face on it, that it's not just abstractions. Rachel, let's go to you and tell me, we were talking before about your connection with, this is your husband's village that you're going to talk about. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So thanks, Jim, for having me. Abbas, I can't believe I have to talk after you. It's gonna not sound as good. But I am Rachel Abouzaid. I my both of my parents are from a town actually east of Saida, the Saida, which we call the gateway to the south. So I've always considered myself from the south, um, even before I got married. But the thing with my parents' village of Alawieh is they were displaced during the Civil War, and none of them really returned, besides my grandmother, but she pretty much lived by herself in that town. So I never really had this sense of community in Lebanon. Like, despite me loving my heritage, being extremely close to my Lebanese roots, I kind of always longed for a home in Lebanon, which I didn't really have until I got married. And my husband's town of Le'laya or Qlayaa became my adopted hometown. And it only strengthened my roots and my love of my home country. And we've been traveling there every summer up until recently. So it's given really me a deep sense of connection to the land. It's given my children a deep sense of connection to the land. So we're very grateful to have that. Qlayaa is actually, it kind of oversees Abbas's village of Arnoun. There's just a valley that separates them, so it's nestled
We
in
have a
the
picture of that. Can we get that up, Liam?
yeah,
Sorry, Rachel.
yeah.
Okay.
That's a nice kind of
Yeah.
um, I want to say drone shot, but the word drone is triggering to me. Yeah, it's a small village, about, I guess, 7,000 or so people in the southeast part of the country. Pretty hilly, like you see there. The staple for, I'm going to call it our town, although it's not really my town, but I want to do its people justice and represent it in the best way that I can. The staple of that town is the plain that they share with the neighboring town of Al-Khiyam. So there's this massive plain in between the two villages. It's just to the west of Le'laya. And that's for agricultural purposes, but it's really kind of the staple of the town. So I guess I can say that the people of the town are struggling because so much of their, not just their identity but their livelihood, depends on agriculture and plain, that they have been prohibited from farming for the last couple years. They depend on it for, like I said, for their livelihood. So economically, they're strangled. And even if they are given permits to go farm the land has also now, as you know, has been contaminated with poisons of all sorts. So even if they do harvest any crops, consuming them or selling them is dangerous, I guess, in a way, because there's a whole kind of ecocide that's been happening in that area. So yeah, like personally, my father-in-law, who lives there the majority of the year, he happens to be in Michigan with us now until things settle down. Um, Pretty much on a daily basis, I see him, like, the misery in his eyes, really, when talking about his olive trees. He's planted about 200 olive trees, and he calls them his children, and he knows them like branch by branch. He knows them in a very intimate way, and he has been unable to harvest them so far this year, not at all, and then in previous years, he's hired some people who were doing it, but he has not been able to tend to his land in the way that he desires to. Um, so yeah, agriculturally, these people are struggling. They depend heavily now on charity and donations from Beirut, and even the means of transportation of getting those goods and necessities to them is difficult because of the transportation routes that have been bombed. So they feel very isolated. Um, so psychologically, it's also taking a very big toll because the majority of them are still in their homes. So, I mean, the majority of the village is still intact. I mean, it's not to say that, we have cousins whose house has been bombed also to shreds. My husband's cousin's house bombed to shreds, but just the feeling of isolation and the psychological damage that they're enduring. I can also comment on the personal kind of death that happened back in March with the priest of the town. I mean, the town is primarily Maronite Christian specifically, and the head of the Maronite Church of St. George, that's actually right next to our home. We're neighbors with the church. The head of that church was killed March 9th, I believe, of this year. Um, uh, Ironically, he was at my husband's cousin's house, or my husband's uncle's house, kind of planning for some funeral arrangements for my husband's cousin who passed from an illness. He heard the explosion, and he left that house and ran towards the home. Him and several other men from the village, and the house was struck again by an Israeli Merkava tank, and his femoral artery was pierced from the shrapnel, and he kind of hemorrhaged out and bled to death on the way to the hospital. So his death was really kind of a significant turning point for the entire town, because he, just days prior to his death, he had been very vocal about staying steadfast and in their presence in their homes, not leaving their homes. They're peaceful people. They're not confrontational. They just want to stay in their homes. So he was very vocal about that, and it was kind of circulating around, some news stations. So kind of when he died, it was like, not that his message died, but his message, you know, um, it was put in question. Are we going to be able to stay in our homes? Historically, the people of the town have never left their homes. They've never physically been displaced. This is kind of the first time where they feel like, are we going to have to leave? Are we going to be forced to leave? And there have been incidents like that, even a couple years ago, where some drones, would target certain vehicles on our main road. There have been several innocent bystanders that have passed away. We have cousins who had shrapnel injuries to the chest. And they have like a group of men who kind of are the protectors of the village. They make sure nobody comes in that's not from the town. They help anybody who needs help. So a couple of years ago, a drone kind of hit a vehicle that passed by, and then this group of boys or men, young men, went to see, who got hit, and they were hit again with another drone. So despite not really engaging in the conflict, they are still being targeted. And yeah, I guess I'll end with like, there are many villages around Alawieh that have been leveled to absolutely nothing, just down the road, less than a mile away. These villages have been leveled. So although Alawieh still remains intact for the most part, like, you can't see their suffering as evidently as other towns. They're still suffering pretty profoundly in a different way.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Abbas. I just, if I could, Abbas, you told a personal story about Rachel before before we went on, and I just share that if you would, because it's important. You're friends, yeah, you went to school together, but there's so much sense of Lebanese division And there's not a sense, as there ought to be, of the fact that we actually are one people in many ways and share. Tell the story if you would.
Sure. Um, so Rachel, if I may share share the story, but Rachel is a dear personal friend. We went to the University of Michigan together, um, and we happened to be two Lebanese American students at the University of Michigan who discovered our shared history. Rachel being from right near the gateway to the south, right near Saida, and me being from near Nabatiyeh. And we bonded over that, and we've remained friends over the years. When Rachel got married in Alawieh, I remember being at Rachel's wedding. I remember visiting her in-laws' home, as my family and I have done multiple times. The relationship between my aunt and my uncle and Rachel's in-laws is that of the neighboring villagers, right? They're from the neighboring village, and so our relationship has deepened over the years. And I one of the highlights of my time in South Lebanon was being on Rachel's in-laws porch, where you could see the back of the Beaufort Castle, and talking to Rachel's son Jude and telling him, "Look, I'm from the village right over there." It's just a couple of Arab American boys being like, "Oh, I'm from that village right over there. We're just a couple of Jnubi boys, just a couple of boys from South Lebanon." That relationship
I
with
like that, Janubi boys. I'm
the
gonna
Jnubi boys, right? And both, Rachel's parents and my parents are very active members of the Arab American communities here in southeastern Michigan and know each other as well. And so our relationship at this point is multi-generational. And in our most difficult moment, when my own family needed somewhere to escape to in 2024, when the Israeli strikes on our village had intensified, and my grandmother needed to be away from the most intense bombing that was hitting the area of Beirut where she was staying. It was actually Rachel's family that stepped up and offered my grandmother a home to stay in the mountains away from the bombing, a moment of reprieve, not just for my grandmother, but for multiple members of my family. And that's I mean, that's just it's something that my entire family will never forget. The way that Rachel and her family have shown up for us, and that's who we are as people. We are one people who are all being targeted unjustly by this level of aggression and
Mhm.
yeah, and tyranny on behalf of the
Thanks.
Israeli military.
Thanks for that, Abbas. The somebody came by my office once years ago, 20 something years ago, and asked me, how do you organize your staff? And I said, well, we have the organizing unit here, and we have the research unit there, and the administrative units there. And he said, no, no, how do you organize your staff? And I said, by function. And he said, no, no, no. The guy out front, he's Shia from Lebanon. I said, I have no idea. It's not on the job application. Well, it turned out about a year ago, there was a problem here in the DC schools, and this guy was quoted in the newspaper. And I called him about the problem in the schools, and he said, "Don't you remember me?" I said, "No, I don't." He said, "I was an intern in your office like 20 years ago." He said, "I'm Rami. I sat at the front desk." "Oh, you're the Shia from South Lebanon." I mean, I didn't know. And I still don't. I mean, what you describe about your meeting Rachel is very much how we started. We looked at each other in school and said, he looks like me and his name is whatever. And we sort of discovered our ethnicity through each other. So I have a couple questions I'd like um, to raise. One is an interesting one from Gene, who's saying that he's trying to get in touch with his mother's family. They lived in Khiam on and off without success. He's had no ability um, to contact them. Do you have ideas how that can be done? Are there sources where you can go to find it? I think we have Khiam coming up in uh, a
Yeah.
couple of sessions down the road. Maybe I'll wait till that. But Gene, let's ask that question later. Um, uh,
If you give me the name, I can try to
okay,
find that.
okay,
My honest advice there would be like through other people. Like we've got to identify people from Khiyam and see if they've heard of that
okay.
specific family.
Gene, send us the information and we'll see what we can do. Okay. Uh, this is an issue that is more political, but it's what do we do? How do we voice our views? I mean, what we started with this was an effort to just kind of bring people to tell their stories. But I would like to, at some point, if you guys are up for it, is we did this with Palestinian families from Gaza. We brought them to Washington to meet with members of Congress. I'd like to do the same with you folks and others because it is, Israel kind of reduces it to an amorphous mass. They objectify so that there's not a human face on the story of the people in Lebanon. We know the Israelis, they come visit Congress all the time. We live in fear. We just want to be safe. That's true. They do. But the people of Lebanon aren't seen or known or heard. And I mean the south of Lebanon in particular in this case. Let's think about doing that. George, it's a great idea, and I think we're going to do something with it. Either of you have anything you want to say about that?
I'm happy to just say one thing in particular. I think Arab Americans in particular, and indeed not just Arab Americans, but every American who is for peace, who is against endless war that targets civilians and their infrastructure has, um, I would say, not just a responsibility, but a duty to not just engage on supporting humanitarian efforts, but also on engaging politically. There is a political consensus in our country, unfortunately, of continuing to fund the Israeli military's attacks on civilians. And I don't care if it's the Israeli military or any other military in the world. Any military that is attacking civilians and their infrastructure that is against our own laws, and we need to be advocating with
Mhm.
our senators, with our members of Congress, and with anyone who wants to run for president in the future that this is a red line for us as Americans. And so as an American here in Michigan in particular, I think we need to organize our community members here in Michigan to make it such that the next time there is a presidential election and one candidate after another is stopping by asking for our votes, we are very clear that as a state, we are pro peace voters. And we want to hear what
Mhm.
your plan is for stopping the
Yeah.
mass killing of our family members abroad.
Yeah. Rachel?
I am not involved in politics at all. I am happy to support. I mean, this is kind of my first
Yeah.
event or anything. So, I mean, maybe it'll be the beginning of others. So I'm not sure, but I'm happy to help in any way.
Well, thanks. Listen, I'm gonna take you up on this and see if we can bring people in just to go visit people and say, we're those people. We're the relatives of these people. It has an impact. Um, I um, yeah, I remember going, when we brought the delegation of the Palestinians from Gaza, it's really hard to take the company line when you're sitting there in front of people who actually are there and they're saying, please help my family, please help the people that we love and know. Um, we're going to release a poll next week. We just finished it. It'll be available on Monday. It's going to come out with my column, and then we'll talk about it next Wednesday, in which we ask questions about Lebanon. And despite the fact that it has been so much less visible in the media than what's going on and has been happening in Gaza, um, public sympathy is there with Lebanon, and the same degree to which people oppose what Israel's doing in Gaza, they oppose what Israel's doing in Lebanon. And people need to know, I think politicians need to know that the support is there to take a strong position. Um, uh, Rachel, my cousin Sadian is on, and she says that we have an aunt who was an Abouzaid, and the the cousins are there's an Antoine and a Jad. Do you know anybody?
No, there's a couple of Abouzaid families in Lebanon. I tend not to be related to any of them when I'm asked. They might be from a different part, a different city. It's a small
Well,
family
I
either way.
claim all the Zogbys because Noelle was way too famous to ignore, even though I don't think she was related. Anyway, thank you. I I think we're going to close out. I thank you so much for what you've done to be here with us today. And Rachel, I'll start with you. Just closing comments, if you would.
Um, Closing comments are the people of Le'laya or Kalaya have lived peacefully with their neighbors. I think they pride themselves on living peacefully among people of all religions, of all backgrounds. They've never had any issues. They love their land. They're very strongly attached to their land. They love the people of the land in their town and outside of their town, like Abbas was saying. Being from neighboring villages is kind of the next closest thing to being family. Whatever we can do, however we can help, I'm happy for the opportunity to kind of speak about them. A lot of them don't have don't have even the courage to speak because they're worried about, repercussions. So I'm happy to do it on their behalf. And I think their main message is that of peace, and they're peaceful people, and they want to remain in their homes and remain in their villages and continue on with their lives.
Thank you. Abbas?
Thank you, Jim. I want to thank you, Jim, and I want to thank the team at AAI for making room for this discussion. I want to thank Rachel for speaking on behalf of her family and her husband's family. I see a question about wondering how long our families have lived in their villages. My family has lived in Arnoun since the 1700s. Before that, we come from the village of Maroun al-Ras, which has also been enduring a level of annihilation that is unimaginable. Just yesterday, I got news. We got news about my mom's home, my grandparents' home on my mom's side in Bint Jbeil, which has also just been reduced to rubble. And my sense as an American is what we are witnessing in South Lebanon, what we witnessed in Gaza, what the people of the West Bank are enduring, is the next is a level of dehumanization, of subjugation that ought to concern all of us, not just people who have family there. I'll tell you a story about my wife and I, after we got married in September. We visited Lebanon in October, and my uncle told us the story of just dystopian stuff. There was drones constantly following us, and he told us a story of after he returned to his home after the first ceasefire in 2024, that there would be a drone. Israel would send a drone to watch him doing his daily tasks as a farmer, grabbing his or delivering, or he got new chickens, and he would put the chicken, move one from one chicken coop to another, and get the eggs from one chicken coop and bring them up to the house. And he had a drone following him as he went about his daily tasks. This is what Israel is doing in to our families in Lebanon, in Gaza, and the West Bank is a petri dish of the level of subjugation, surveillance that we need to all vehemently reject as Americans who value civil liberties for ourselves and for everyone. And this is something that ought to concern all of us. And so I welcome the opportunity to continue engaging, continue telling our families' stories, even though it is difficult. I'll be honest with you, Jim. Before I told the story publicly of my grandmother's home being targeted, I had very difficult conversations with my dad, and we know the level of dehumanization, of criminalizing Arab American existence. My dad told me, what if we tell our story and you get attacked politically because you're running for office, Abbas, and people say, "Oh, maybe they blew up your grandma's home because something bad was happening there. Maybe this will open you up to a level of political attack." But the reality is, the pain is too great to stay silent, and the injustice is too great, and it's being done with our own government's support. And so we've got to step up as Americans and speak out against it, regardless of what the vulnerabilities might be. And so I'm really grateful for the space to tell my grandmother's story here. It's important that we hear her story and the story of many others who deserve better. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you both. It was an important beginning for a conversation that we want to have across the south of Lebanon. Next Thursday at the same time, we're going to do the villages of Bint Jbeil and Nabatea, and we're going to connect with people there if we can, as well as having their family members from here. The conversation's important. Look, it's been troubling me as somebody who does this and has been doing this for 50 years. Um, when I see the dehumanization you talk about, which is the other side of the dehumanization of us, is the invisibility. Um, we know Israelis suffer. We know that they have pain. The, we just, their victims never have pain, and we never hear their cries. Um, and uh, and it's that motivated us to want to do this, so that we get to tell our story, so that we get to be heard, so that we put ourselves on an equal playing field as people who have stories to tell and want to be heard and want to be recognized. And so I thank all of you who joined. We had some wonderful people on. Ellen Siegel was on today, and Ellen, I don't know if folks remember, but back during Sabra and Shatila, the massacres there, Ellen was one of a group of American nurses who were in Sabra and Shatila at the time, and just performed heroically, caring for the victims, and then coming back, and we toured them around the country telling the stories of what they saw. And Ellen, thanks for joining us today. And didn't get to all the questions that were asked, but I appreciated it. Join us, please, next Wednesday when we talk about the polling data, which I think you'll find fascinating about where American attitudes are. And then next Thursday when we talk about the next two villages, Bint Jbeil and Nabatea. Thank you guys, both of you, for joining us.